let's fix this problem. First of all, thank you for being here. Can you please introduce yourselves if they don't know who you are? I'm pretty sure they do.
Sure. I'm John Middleton. I'm CEO and co-founder of Nifty Games. Nifty Games is a mobile-focused company doing sports games, short session, head-to-head. I've been in gaming for about 25 years, and we funded this company up with some interesting partners mid last year into late last year.
And I'm Pete Wanat. I also been in games for 20 plus years, co-founder with John for Nifty, and we'd been in the game industry for a long time and had actually met a really long time ago when I was working at Acclaim. John was making a game about a cockroach, and I ended up...
That's true, yeah. I did make a game about a cockroach.
Working on it with him, and at Acclaim I was doing mostly sports games, and I did sports games for a long time, and then moved over to making a lot of games based on...
Well, tell them which sports games. Don't be shy.
So my first game in the industry was I worked on NBA Jam TE. I did the stats for the home ports that Acclaim did, and then worked on Frank Thomas Baker Hurt Baseball, All-Star Baseball, NFL Quarterback Club, and a number of other sports titles that Acclaim was doing, and then moved from sports to doing games based on TV and movies, and then did that for about 20 years. Went from Acclaim to Universal, and then I left Universal last January. And I was talking with John about sort of what games we wanted to make next, and we felt like we were both playing most of our games on mobile devices, and it sort of, even though we occasionally get a chance between kids and stuff we had to do to keep the family going, we had less and less time for console and PC games, which is sort of what we grew up on, and we were playing mostly on mobile, and wondering where all the sports games on mobile went. And I think that's what started the conversation that started Nifty.
So that connects quite nicely to my next one, which is why sports?
Well, I think, there's one initial answer is because we love sports. We're sports guys through and through. Pete and I have been doing fantasy sports and just fans of sports, as long as I can remember, literally. I think we've been in fantasy baseball and football leagues together for 20 years. But secondarily, and probably more importantly, from a commercial standpoint, we view sports as very much community-driven. There's, not just passionate fan bases, but there's also a lot of community around amateur sports, around playing sports, viewing sports, really every aspect of it. And we view that as from a mobile gaming perspective, when you look at user acquisition and trying to, you're gearing things towards retention, even monetization. It's a nice asset to have when you're kind of delivering product to people that really want it.
Yeah, I think sports fans have. Fan is short for fanatic, right? And fans have a tendency to, if you are a lover of a team or a league or a player, you tend to spend more. You can buy a $350 Boston Bruins hockey jersey and
just did, right?
But you'll spend an inordinate amount of money to buy things with your team's logo on it, right? And the amount of ridiculous stuff that I have that is Boston Red Sox logoed up is insane. And then not only do I do it for myself, I've got two kids and they're 6 and 3, and both of them are diehard Red Sox fans. My daughter might not quite know it yet, but I'm pretty sure she is. So, but I think it's that fanaticism that we feel like we know. It's supported, games like Madden and FIFA. Like, you play the game, you love the game, you want to play the digital version of it. And we grew up playing all those games and have a love of sports games in general. And I think something that Ginger made in the seminar, but right before us, where she was talking about the social aspect. Sports are inherently social. It's you call up your friends, and whether they root for your team or root for the rival team. I was a Boston Red Sox fan who grew up in 20 minutes outside of Manhattan, so all my friends were Yankee fans growing up. It was shit talking is part of what makes it fun. And even so, it doesn't matter if you don't root for the team I root for. It can still be, you have a shared community like that. And for us, we view sports games as an instant community. You probably have leagues as opposed to guilds, but it's pretty much the same thing. You have a group of fans who are united by a love of a sport, and sometimes, in our case, a love of many sports. So it's not just one sport that is the driver for that.
Yeah, and you may have picked up that Pete and I are both pretty much diehard Boston area sports fans, so I apologize for that. We can be a bit obsessive and annoying.
Although I went for the cheap heat.
He did. He
went the hometown baseball team. So
full Ichiro.
Yeah,
it's good. Yeah.
I unfortunately I don't know anything about the American team, so.
Well, and that's a good point. So it's not just an American phenomenon, right? So if you look at sort of the way the football culture, the soccer culture is in basically the rest of the world, and the amount of the fact that you have you have a team in Manchester in the UK who is as big a global entity, or whether that's Barcelona, who's not just a football team, but sort of a nationality-defining movement for, that community.
That I totally understand. Brazilians kill each other for football.
Right.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. It's
or the Dodger parking lot. Either way.
Whatever it takes. Yeah. And I think that it's a global standard that as humans, we enjoy sport. It's just the way it is. And I think it doesn't matter what region you're in. The sports tend to differ, whether it's baseball in the United States or whether it's soccer in Europe or whether, it's basketball in a lot of different parts of the globe. And then, different territories have different sports that they're driven by and drawn to. But the big thing is still fans behave the same way, and they're always supportive of not just teams and it's not always just where they're from, but it's also players. They're supportive of players, and they follow players from team to team or from, effort to effort, and you see it all the way through to Olympic sports. And frankly, the other big thing I think that is lost as far as kind of the general fandom of sports is that low-level amateur sport where people are either playing themselves or their kids are playing, and you tend to get wrapped up more and more in different types of sports. I'm coaching like 2 little league teams right now, and I think I'm more fanatical about that than anything. I'm like, we gotta get by those Diamondbacks. I'm like, I can't. Thursday afternoon is going to be brutal. So it's kind of it's a fun thing, and sports wraps really well into video games, obviously, and then when you get into mobile and you get into short session and you get into competitive head-to-head, it all adds up nicely.
And having your developer hat on, what are the biggest differences in developing games for fans, for sports fans in this case, but for fanatics instead of the normal game users?
I'll pass. I'm the biz guy, so I have no discernible skills. I'll pass that one to Pete.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think with anything, it's about, and I did a lot of games based on movies and television shows, but it's the same thing. It's about authenticity, right? Like, I think when you see sports that are even something like sort of NBA Jam, which is sort of the cartoonish version of the sport, it still had real teams, real players, and it followed the rules of basketball up until a point. And then at that point, it decided like what, the great gaming element, which is, keep it true to the sport. And this is an axiom for us as well. Keep it true to the sport. And then any place we have where we can really make sure that we add another level of excitement and fun for the player, then we go there. But we want to stay true to the sport. We don't want to make fun of it. This isn't, giant bobblehead version of the sport or comical, putting up a brick wall behind a hockey goalie or a soccer net or in front of a soccer net. So that you want to keep it real to the sport, but then make sure that at the end of the day, you're still making a video game and the game has to be fun. And that for us is something we spend a lot of time making sure that we are very true, right up until the point where we have to make sure that at the end we're not making real football or real baseball or real hockey. We are making a digital version of that, and that has to be fun. And for us, it has to be fun not just as a single-player experience. It has to be fun. All our games are designed just like real sport to play versus another competitor. And that we want to do so in a manner that is faster than a traditional sort of console game. We're playing on a mobile device, so that game has to be played in a much quicker session so that I can get a game in, and if I have the time, I can get another game in. But if I don't, I can move on and go through and deal with the rest of my life. Has shorter attention spans. I mean, we just sort of watched a thing about instant games, which is, really, really fast. I don't know that we're quite that fast. We're sort of core casual or casual core, if we're trying to define where our spot is. But it's definitely a game that has to be played versus somebody else.
You're kind of reading my mind. So as you're specialized in fast-paced games, do you think are the biggest issues that you developers find to keep retention when you're talking about fast-paced games?
Yeah, I think for us it's about making sure that the player feels, it's just like any good game, right? When you play it and you lose, you immediately go, oh, I know exactly what I did wrong that time, and I'm going to redefine my team roster, my roster construction very quickly, and I'm going to go back again. Or they performed a move on me, or they had a certain setup of the way they had their players in the field or on the court or on the rink, and now I know exactly what I did wrong. And it's like I remember sort of playing any great game from my childhood. My mom would tell me, like, okay, you have to go to bed now. You have to put down the controller. And then I would go upstairs and I'd lay in my bed and think about, like, oh, now I understood. And then couldn't wait to get up the next morning and go solve, that particular puzzle element that I couldn't figure out in the game while I was playing it. But once I left and went away from it, and that's what we want players to do, to constantly be thinking, okay, if I upgrade my player here, I can be able to perform better than I did last time and win as opposed to lose.
Yeah, and again, that's when we talk about capturing the essence of sport, when you look at sports, that's one of the real true aspects is kind of reward and regret, and how do you look at ways to compete with who you're facing off with your competitor, and it's a win or lose situation. And I think it just dovetails perfectly into gaming. When you get into short session gaming, as mobile evolves, and we see a lot of success in synced head to head. Sports is like absolutely the nicest fit. It's kind of like we feel like with Nifty Games, we're running around with a key and a door showed up, and it's just a perfect situation for us to go and fish where the fishes are, deliver a product to passionate audiences that already have a total proclivity towards getting engaged with it, staying engaged, and that's obviously the keys with mobile, so we can monetize what we're building.
I mean, look at Ginger's presentation from before, right? Like, it was nothing to do with sports, about instant games. How many examples of sports did she have in instant games? It's like the most popular, the one that started off the instant game craze at Facebook was a basketball game. One of the ones that had sort of the most users was a soccer penalty kick game. It's like she wasn't even talking about sports, and yet in games, sports shows up over and over again. Look at the multi-billion-dollar success of Madden and FIFA. Like, sports and games have always been tied together. And so for us, it was a natural fit to sort of bring them to mobile in a way that they hadn't been currently on the mobile platform before.
I wanted to go back a little bit to the fandom part. When you're talking about sports fans, there is a big connection. There is an identity of the sports fans to a certain team. It's not only wearing the jersey or liking the team. Some fans, well, most fans have a real identity. It defines them, even like the personality that they are by the team that they love.
Sure.
How do you think you can create that with a fast-paced game? Like, do you believe it's possible to create the same passionate connection to the game that they have with the team?
Sure, and it's a little bit of a double-edged sword for us because in a lot of ways, if you're a fan of baseball, then that we can address that, and we can work with those fans in our games and how they want to engage with the sport. But however, if you're a fan of the Red Sox versus the Yankees, that's very much a bipartisan black and white situation. And, so for us, it's more, in many ways, we're looking at similar to fantasy sports, not that we're, statistically driven, kind of, static content. We're going after, obviously, more dynamic, head-to-head, short session. But we're looking at ways where maybe the eclectic lineups that you see in fantasy, it's more about a collection of different types of items and games that would have more of an affiliation with what you like as a fan, but not necessarily isolate the entire fan community from one another, so that, in UK terms, if you're a Man City guy versus, a Man U guy or gal, you might not have the idea that maybe you want to interact with those other teams. But the way we're going about building out the games and the structure of our content is to set it up in the way that it can be the most, digestible or approachable for the fan. And we do talk about fans a lot. You'll hear us say that all the time. And I think a lot of mobile game companies, particularly startups, it's always the gamers. They're going after the gamers. We're definitely a company that's going after fans of situations and of sports, but also obviously gamers. But we were definitely highly focused on fans and that aspect of it.
And to add to that, the other aspect for us is always going to be about, giving the players or fans the most customizable version of that sport, so that they can feel like they're making part of it their own. And we're looking at free-to-play, microtransactions, and that we want to be able to let fans sort of have a greater influence on what their look and feel is within the context of the game. And so we constantly talk about, how do we make this so that if you're a fan of, Man U or Arsenal, like, that you can really make sure that your gameplay feel has more of that, right? So if it's the Liverpool, you'll never walk alone, and you can really make sure that it's all tied to that.
Oh, that was very international. Well done.
Nice. And
Timely.
And my last question is, you develop for mobile, but a little bird told me that you're also looking into going to other platforms. And so I want to say, do you believe that nowadays it's key to get all the users that you want for developers to go for more than one platform instead of focusing on just one?
Yeah, I should be clear. We are absolutely positively focused on free-to-play mobile, but we've, since our announcement, we've been at our doors knocked on quite vigorously by other people who have devices that you can either touch or click. And they also are interested in, even though it's not the core focus, we've been asked a lot about, will we bring the types of games we're doing to consoles or PC, where you can, I think for us it's a matter of, we're focused on, it's a touch-based system, but it works extraordinarily well with a mouse and keyboard if that's an avenue we wanted to go down. But right now, I think for us it's, as free-to-play accelerates its entree into the, consoles and PC, I think we are obviously interested in that, but the focus is definitely on mobile.
Yeah, and I think it's for, on that subject, it's less about extension of distribution, looking at specific alternative platforms for mobile. I mean, like Pete said, we're definitely mobile first, but I think we believe that cross-platform play is here to stay. It makes sense for all games and all gamers, really. So I think, as we grow, sure. I mean, if it makes sense to be cross-platform, which it does, then there's different platforms out there where it would be nice for our gamers to be able to play as an alternative to their mobile device if they happen to be in front of that platform, whatever that may be.
And I would like to open the floor to the audience if you guys want to ask any questions.
Come on, I didn't get any questions in London. I want questions.
People are very
I want to be grilled.
shy. Yeah, people are very shy for questions.
Question.
So it sounds like, what I'm picking up, you guys you know who your target audience is,
Yeah.
and you're very kind of laser focused on that.
Correct.
Have you thought about doing a broad appeal, like true hyper-casual test in the market to see if people might be interested in some of the concepts at a lighter weight, faster play, maybe even a little bit less, less I don't know, stressful sort of format.
Sure.
Increase that audience.
Yeah, I think we see, so we've done a remarkably good job of sort of talking about sports and games without sort of speaking about what a sort of nifty game is, right? But I think when we launch and soft launch, and you can see, I think that our games are infinitely more accessible than what the current, offering is, and we think about that a lot, right? So one of the things that we know that when you have, that the majority of football fans or basketball fans or hockey fans or soccer fans, there are way more of these groups, people in those groups that just don't play, that may play a match 3 game, right? But they're not, they're too intimidated at sort of a bigger sports fair. And I think what we're trying to offer is that entry level for a much more casual gamer, and certainly by doing so, we also are hoping, and we feel like we're succeeding at, having interest for a much younger gamer. So where, my son is 6, he's not playing a game that has, all these plays in it. He doesn't, it's way beyond him, right? But he loves games, and he always wants the device. So it's like giving him games that he can play and feel like he's succeeding at. So that casual audience is every bit, if not more important to us than just the regular fans. We know we're going to bring the regular fans with us, but we are way more focused on making sure that the on-ramp to getting in to play our game is a much faster experience. I would argue that our game, you could play a full version of our game in what would be, the time you would spend trying to learn a tutorial of another game.
Yeah, and you look at, I mean, it's a good segue. I'm on a panel in about an hour and a half, about instant games compared to, usual casual. And, the more lines we can get in the water, the better. Sports fans tend to be pretty widespread. There's a lot of guys and gals out there that maybe were big fans of sports games when they were younger, that have gravitated, moved out of games altogether. They're in different parts of their life. They're doing, I would love to bring them back. I would love to find ways to draw them into mobile gaming. And I think there's different tools that are there available. And I think, the Facebook presentation before this is, that's an interesting tactic, not just to go and build, instant games for monetization, but for promotion of our overall set of games.
And it's not just how we get them into playing the games. It's also about the way. Look, mobile is about user acquisition, right? Like if you're really going to build a successful financial game, you have to go out there and pay to bring users to your experience. We also believe that we're innovating not just on the game side of things, but we have ways of bringing in players that normally wouldn't get a chance to see it. Somebody who's not playing another mobile game, so is not getting those insanely annoying mobile ads that surface in your game when you want a couple free tokens or gems. We believe that the relationships that we're working on outside of the actual game itself will help to bring in some of that audience who said, you know what, I haven't downloaded a mobile game before, or I have, but it was a while ago, and I did it when I gave my nephew my phone, right? We believe that we have ways of user acquisition that go beyond the traditional models, and it's only available to us because of how sports intersects with those fans.
Yeah, so on that, it's not just about kind of cracking the rocks within the gaming market that allow us to access larger pools of fans, but there's also the real world aspect and going after more traditional marketing and event marketing, where you have huge available user acquisition situations that are kind of innately unique to sports. Sports there's a real world connection. It's not we're not talking about building games with dragons and dwarfs. It's definitely something where I think our audience will, I don't want to say they're easy to find, but from our standpoint, We've got a laser focus on sports. We're going to find every avenue we can to find sports fans that are gamers to come into our games, and then we're going to try like heck to keep them there and hopefully make some money while we do.
Unfortunately, our time is up, but thank you very much. I know we
right.
could,
Thank you
we
so
could
much.
talk forever
We
about
could. Just go outside. It'd be great.
But thank you very much.
Thank
That
you.
was
Well,
awesome.
Thank you
Please
all.
give a big hand.
Much appreciated.